In today's video, we have the latest trade talk on the Ottawa Senators as they desperately try to find some cap space to sign Shane Pinto. Could their trade partner end up being the Philadelphia Flyers? And how that may work, we'll discuss that today. Plus, we have some comments raising eyebrows from a couple of NHL players, including Debrincat Kuznetsov regarding former coach Peter Laviolette and Alex Debrincat on his time with the Senators. Now he may bounce back with Detroit. We also have some roster cuts and some sad news to pass along regarding a former NHL player. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to talk about today. First up, though, I want to address the very sad news that the NHL world has experienced earlier. Former 36th overall selection in 2012, Nick Kerdiles, has unfortunately passed away at the very young age of 29. Apparently, he passed away in a motorcycle accident. Actually, he only ever played 3 NHL games. Was highly respected as a really good person. I've seen lots of comments today just talking about how good of a person he was and how well liked was within his teammates and coaches. 29 is way too young. So unfortunate news. We want to pass along our condolences to his friends and family and anybody affected by this tragic passing at such a young age. Now, we had, with the time difference, a lot of people probably did miss it. I know some channels, like I know here in Canada, Sportsnet was replaying on a different time just to give you a chance. But the global series from Australia, from down under, the Coyotes and the Kings. I believe it was starting where I live 1 o'clock in the morning last night. I think it was midnight Eastern, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, it was too late for me. I did catch part of the game, which was on replay after this morning. It was on sometime later in the morning again after breakfast. So at least I get to see some of it. Win 5-3. Logan Cooley, oh my God, had a beautiful spinorama type goal, put on a show for the fans in Australia. He is going to be good, and I think this Coyotes team might be more competitive than a lot of people might think. They had a really good game, and we knew they made a lot of changes and had some young talent coming into the league this year. They looked good. We'll see. I know it's early, 1 game preseason. You can't put much stock into that. Doesn't matter if they win or lose, but they did look good, and they put on a good show for the fans in Australia, which is the main thing, trying to grow the game outside of North America like the NHL's been working on for some time. So certainly good on them. If you haven't seen the Cooley goal, certainly check for highlights for sure. Some teams have already started making roster cuts in training camp, mostly just sending some junior age players back, not eligible to play anywhere else, so they're returning to their Canadian junior clubs. But the Buffalo Sabres have returned Ethan Medema and Scott Rantzlaff. The Kraken have sent back Eric Jameson, Tyler Palmer, and Caden Price. And the Columbus Blue Jackets have sent back Luca Pinelli and Tyler Peddle. They're all returned back to their junior clubs across the Canadian Junior League. So that's likely going to continue over the next day or two. I suspect we'll see a lot of players similar to that, junior age players that are still under the age of 20 that are 100% going back, having their time in training camps cut as the preseason action starts to pick up. Devon Toews and his future in Colorado. He's a huge piece there with the Avalanche. A lot of people are speculating on what his future holds. He's a pending unrestricted free agent. When they picked him up from the New York Islanders, they paid 2 second-round picks. I think they're looking at that as a steal of a trade right now. I think Lou Lamoriello is probably kicking himself that maybe he traded the wrong defenseman. But to be fair, at the time, I don't know that they've seen enough from Toews to project that he was going to become what he did with the Avalanche. And, obviously, we get to be on a different pair with Cale Makar. Obviously, some different coaching, evolved a little bit of his game, a different role, and he excelled, and he took off. At the end of the day, he's thrived thoroughly with the Avalanche, and his value has increased exponentially, now viewed upon by, depending on who you ask, he's either considered a top 10 or top 15 defenseman in the league for sure. He and Makar are a dynamic duo, and he's not making a ton of money right now, but his next contract could be substantially larger. Of course, as you grow and your players expand their horizons, as we've seen in many teams here with the salary cap, it can be challenging to keep everybody. So Devon Toews, would be a very interesting name on the UFA market next year, should he make it there. However, he did get asked about this, which is no big surprise by local reporters in Colorado, and he addressed his future, saying that he fully intends to want to stay with the Avalanche, and he would really wants to get an extension done before the season starts. So that tells us that they're probably talking. For him to say that, I would imagine talks are ongoing. I know Elliotte Friedman said that both sides really want to make it happen too, so that's always positive when you know for sure you want to. But at the same time, I think it's fair to say that if Devon Toews wants to stay in Colorado and sign a long-term deal, that he's probably going to end up taking less money than he would get on the open market. So how much of a discount are you willing to give in order to stay with your team, be competitive year after year, and have a chance to win additional Stanley Cups? That's what you got to ask yourself, right? And, some players are more about the money, some are more about the winning. But Devon Toews certainly has every intention of staying. If things don't get done by the time the season starts and they stop talking, that will certainly spawn a lot of, rumors and talks about maybe he won't be able to stay. But we'll see where that goes. It's certainly a situation worth watching, because I'm sure a lot of teams are out there watching this situation, because if he does become available later on, if things don't work out, then there's going to be tons of interest of teams, no doubt. But for right now, the interest is trying to get something done between both clubs, and we'll see how it goes. Now, as I mentioned, we have 2 NHL players that have done interviews that have spawned some really interesting comments and some really choice words, which are probably going to upset some people and are probably going to be getting their old teams riled up. So here's what's going on. So with Evgeny Kuznetsov, we'll start with him. Did an interview with a Russian outlet and had some really choice words for former head coach Peter Laviolette, which I think just might, like the Caps Rangers already have a good rivalry. Obviously, Laviolette became the head coach of the Rangers over the summer. I do wonder if this will, certainly, maybe enhance the rivalry a little bit. We'll see. But Kuznetsov basically made some comments, and he talked a lot about some of the very blunt conversations he had with GM Brian McClellan. And he said, for example, you brought in a coach who didn't fit our system. He said, you paid me all this money for something, right? So for the things I did well, the coach completely changed the style of play, wouldn't let us do the things that we did well, essentially telling them to do things completely different. So we knew the last couple of years Kuznetsov was not happy in Washington. We've heard lots of talk and lots of rumors about him being moved, and maybe he needed a fresh start. And all that, I'm sure, was true. I think there was a lot of talks about him getting a fresh start. I believe the fact that he and the GM have had talks about him maybe moving on. But at the same time, it sounds like he's putting a lot of those issues he was having on the coach. And that he said he's had talks already multiple times before camp with Spencer Carberry about the style of play and all that type of stuff. And he sounds like it would be a way better fit for him. He seems quite happy. Sounds like he respects his opinions more on what's the best way to play and how to utilize not only the best way to play in his opinion, but how to best utilize their roster to be successful, right? So he made a lot of comments saying based on what we have for players, it just didn't make sense to play the style Laviolette was preaching. And he also made it sound like Laviolette was not open at all to getting feedback from players. He talked to them and he would tell them these things, but nothing ever changed. So as we know, Kuznetsov has not been afraid to kind of speak his mind. He's been an interesting player. He can be really, really good. He was super important to the Capitals when they won the Stanley Cup in 2018. He's had his ups and downs since then. And obviously coaching can play a role. And he also said that he's not the kind of player that just, gets paid lots of money and forgets everything. Regardless of what he's getting paid, he wants to win and he wants to do his best. And if he has a bad practice, he has a bad game, he said that bothers him. And then we've heard lots about, Kuznetsov from a mental health perspective, or, that's why a lot of people thought it was best for him to get a fresh start. That just things didn't go well and that he wasn't necessarily dealing with it well, and sometimes you just need to get away and get a start somewhere else. And at the end of the day here, maybe the new coach will bring that to him instead of him having to leave, because clearly his contract made it difficult to move him. He had trade protection, so he had some say, so that made things challenging. And then on top of that, you're going to want to replace him with another top 6 quality center, and that's challenging too. So, maybe it's for the best that a deal never got worked out and something was found for him to go to, because he might be able to stay, get things worked out with his new coach and see. But certainly I wonder how things will be reacted to while the Laviolette side of things, and if that might spice things up when the Caps and Rangers play this year. The other player we want to talk about who made some interesting comments, which I'm sure, I know for a fact Ottawa fans are all over this on social media. I would love to know how the Senators' former teammates of Debrincat would react to this. They probably will never say anything publicly, but at the same time, his comments, they wish they have every right to be totally infuriated. So he did an interview with a Detroit outlet, obviously talking about how he's hoping to have a better season in Detroit this year than he did in Ottawa last year. Of course, prior to that, he was in Chicago, had a couple of 40-goal seasons. Even when he didn't score 40, he was still getting close to 30, was recognized as a pretty good two-way player, hard worker, all those things. There was lots to like about Debrincat's game. And a lot of people thought that it was far from, some people didn't want to give him enough credit and say playing with Kane is what made him good. That's not really, it never hurts, but he was good on his own. But he made some comments here. Like one of them, for example, he said, "I've got to focus more on bearing down when I get my chances. I think last year I gave up on a lot of chances, maybe got lazy on them or whatever. It maybe hit a post, stuff like that." That's infuriating to hear, to say that he didn't bear down enough. He gave up on plays too much and we got lazy on it. Like you could tell now that Debrincat, his heart wasn't in it. Like it is, like you could tell that he didn't seem fully invested, which is mind-boggling to me. Even if, like, I know a lot of people said he never asked me to go to Ottawa. Maybe he wasn't a good fit family-wise. Okay. All that aside, regardless if you've seen yourself there long-term or not, I don't think he really went there and gave it a fair chance for one. It sounds like he went there with not a great attitude and didn't give it his best. At the end of the day, you're playing for a contract, no matter if it's in Ottawa or somewhere else. So no wonder he didn't get the contract he was looking for this year. He didn't get the 7-8 year deal. He didn't get the amount of money he was looking for, because after what he did last year, I think some people had doubts, and I don't blame them. Ottawa was never going to give him a $9 million contract offer based on how he played last year. There's just no way. No way he was going to become the team's highest paid player on a 9x8 deal when he was not anywhere near the level of Brady Tkachuk or Tim Stützle. There's just no way. That would be ridiculous and would have handcuffed them to the cap even more than they already are, trying to sign Shane Pinto, which we're going to talk about here in a couple minutes. But Debrincat also went on to say that last year he didn't have the best two-way game, but in the past years have been a pretty good two-way player. And he went on to say that being a good two-way forward creates so many more chances for you and your line mates. So why weren't you a good two-way forward last year? It sounds like he just didn't put the effort in. This is kind of like a confession almost, that he didn't bear down. He got lazy. There was some talk about him not being in the absolute best shape when he arrived at camp. I don't know about that. I can't speak to that. I did hear that beginning of last year. I don't know how much truth there is to it. But it's still, I've watched every single Sens game last year in full, so I can speak to his play on the ice, and he absolutely was horrendous as a two-way player, which was surprising considering what I'd seen previously in Chicago. And now it makes more sense if knowing he wasn't giving it his full effort. So I would suspect that his Senators teammates are not going to be enjoying seeing these comments, considering they were only 6 points out of the playoffs. And I don't know how many times the game was on his stick at the end of the game to try to help him score a big goal, and it didn't work out. That they only needed a few more wins and they were in. And to have to hear that one of your top 6 players are getting lots of ice time, wasn't doing everything wasn't giving it their all, bearing down, got lazy, that's not what you want to hear. So I'll be interested to see when he does make his return to Ottawa, how his teammates and how the fans react. I suspect there's a good chance he's going to get booed. That might have happened anyway. I don't know. But anyways, some pretty crazy comments there from both of these players. One more, a bit more of a positive outcome than the other, but still shots fired at his head coach in Kuznetsov's case. And in Debrincat's case, it was more shots fired at himself, really, more than anything. But like I said, this kind of makes him look bad and shows that he didn't really put the effort in like he should have. But like really, if you didn't see yourself there and you wanted to play yourself out of town, wouldn't you think you would have given it the most ridiculous, crazy effort you've ever given in your life, and that you're going to basically price yourself out of there? It would have been a lot easier to come back and say, well, like, the Senators just couldn't give me the contract because I basically I outperformed my current contract, and they just, it was too much. That's an easier sell, and then nobody really ever needs to know how you felt about Ottawa, because it's never going to become a talking point. It's because you did so well that, you made more money elsewhere. So anyway, it's just kind of a crazy scenario, which kind of confirms what a lot of people thought. There was a lot of times people really questioned his effort last year, and this just kind of, confirms things. When it comes to Ottawa, though, we know they're desperately trying to find cap space, and there's a lot of talk today from fourthperiod.com between Dave Pagnotta and one of his reporters, Anthony DeMarco. But there's lots of conversations reportedly going on between the Sens and the Flyers around Philadelphia, maybe taking Matthew Joseph off their hands. But it sounds like they want a pretty penny here. Now, here's which I think is kind of crazy, but Joseph is making $295 for 3 more years, and they want a first-round pick or a first-round quality prospect that was recently drafted in order to take that contract off their hands. Which is, considering what they gave up to move like Zaitsev and other things, like that is a crazy high price tag. Joseph might be the odd easy man out here in Ottawa, and you could say he's overpaid, but it's not like he's overpaid by a ton. It's nothing like a Zaitsev situation. Like, he's overpaid by maybe $500 to $700K. Instead of making $2.9, if he was making closer to 2 or 2.1, 2.2, it would be a lot more reasonable. And yes, he didn't have a great season last year, but maybe Ottawa might be better off to maybe try to retain a little bit of the money, but they ideally need the full 2.9, because they not only do they need to sign Pinto, but they would like to sign Josh Bailey too if they can. At least that's the early plan, depending on how training camp goes and how he looks at preseason action. Maybe they'll change their mind on that one. At the very least, you got to get Pinto taken care of. That's priority number one. But for the Flyers to be holding them hostage for that kind of a price tag, it explains why we haven't seen anything happen yet, because obviously Pierre Dorion is going to be very reluctant to pay that kind of price. There was some suggestions that maybe that first round, and this comes from the Philadelphia Reporter, DeMarco, saying that maybe Tyler Boucher could be that prospect included. To be honest, if I'm Dorion, if I can't find anything better, as much as it hurts a little bit, I would probably do that. I'm not sure Tyler Boucher is ever going to be a high-profile Ottawa Senator. Could he be an NHLer with the Sens? Yes, I think it's possible. I think he's doomed to be in the bottom 6, though, and considering how highly he was drafted, I don't know. I mean, it's early, and it can be real easy to be wrong about prospects, but the early indications are that that's probably what he's going to be. Not to say that you don't need players like that, you do, and I'm sure that they're looking forward to him being a full-time member of that bottom 6 at some point in the next year or two, but at the same time, you can't lose Pinto. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here, but the Flyers are likely, unless somebody other team emerges, a big player here and taking something off the Sens' hands to make it happen. And a lot of people are talking about maybe Eric Brandstrom being the option instead of Joseph, which I get because they do have more on the defense side to replace him with. But Joseph makes $900K more than Brandstrom, and they need that extra money to make everything work cap-wise. I don't think you're going to have Shane Pinto holding out all this time to sign for like $2 million. He's going to need closer to $2.5. At least I think so. So let me know what you think on all the comments from Kuznetsov and Debrincat and the Sens trying to make a trade here with the Flyers. Is this price tag a little bit crazy, or is it reasonable? Let me know in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.